Hey everyone, welcome back. Yes, this is another gas video, but it's legit. After all this time, people would harp on Merciless and how it was the greatest bow ever because of how fast it could shoot, the ridiculous amount of toxin procs, innate toxin on the clouds, and just solid utility. But then came the proboscis Cernos. First built for corrosive, it was a solid competitor to the gas and electric memes of Merciless Cernos. But once electric proboscis arrived, it dethroned Merciless Cernos once and for all. Yet all this time, we have forgotten another extremely strong bow that can both crit and status all at once. This bow is Daikyu. This is a video geared towards base steel path. I would not recommend this for endurance setups. You might think this is a single target bow, but it really doesn't have to be. With sky high crit and status and forced impact, you can feel the damage on this weapon easily with slash for arcane procs, or chain AoE damage with gas and electric. This is an incredibly simple video today, but just a reminder that there are always more weapons available for the job. There is more than just the meta. Even something as simple as an incredibly hard-hitting single target bow can be turned into a crowd killer with a few tweaks here and there. Cernos Prime can do this too, but that's not the highlight for today. Anyways, let's grab a closer look at Daikyu, shall we? Daikyu is a asymmetrical bow that came out a very long time ago, back in 2015 in fact. It's been buffed a few times since then, especially with the bow rebalancing that made them much stronger. It also gets a 1.25 dispo, so rivens on it are pretty strong, and because we're turning it into an AoE hazard here, it gets pretty dangerous. While nowhere near the highest, Daikyu chimes in with 34% critical chance. This is just enough to break the 100% mark with critical delay. While you may not think this is a good idea to do the double fire rate penalty on bows, you'll soon see why it's worth it later. It also has the second highest status chance of all bows, only behind Merciless Cernos at 46%. This is so high that with just two 60/60 mods you reach 100% status. We're also playing with 3 meter punch through, meaning a single shot will smash multiple targets. This is especially useful in crowds because it means a single arrow can proc status on multiple enemies at once, further improving your AoE potential. The reload delay is 0.6, however this value is mostly irrelevant. Bows do have a reload, and it's the time until you can start charging the next shot. This can be improved with mods and abilities, but generally isn't worth modding for. We also now have primary Merciless, which gives us a free 30% reload bonus that also applies to the bow post-shot delay. The charge rate is 1.0. Most of you know by now bows get double effect from fire rate mods. This does not carry over into fire rate arcanes or abilities, but it does mean negative fire rate mods also have double effect. Finally, the base damage. Excluding the AoE bows, Daikyu has the highest damage per hit. It also force procs impact, and all bows have a base fire rate of 1, so internal bleeding memes rejoice. How about we take a look at some of Daikyu builds? This is what your typical Daikyu probably looks like in the current meta. Strong slash, galvanized multi-shot, extremely precise. Built with just two 60/60 mods to make viral and nail 100% status. IPS weight is irrelevant because internal bleeding procs have our guaranteed impact, but this only has 85% critical chance from point strike. This is a build for marksmen who takes their time with their shot. 1 second charge rate, but we have primed Banes that double dip that slash for insane bleeds. Alternatively, we can offer this build instead. We have dropped point strike for critical delay instead, which lets us surpass that 100% crit chance threshold. This build is also much spammier with vile acceleration to offset the fire rate penalty of critical delay. We get a net 60% bonus fire rate with double effect for 120. Slotting vile acceleration came at the cost of losing the Bane, but in theory we could drop Amalgam Serration to retain the Bane instead, as we already have primary Merciless. For a spammier build, we've also opted for split flights, which lets us reach 400% multi-shot for 5 simultaneous arrows at once. This one is less about hitting heads and rather just firing as many slashy arrows at once into the horde of enemies. And that's about it. These have been our two main Daikyu builds for quite a while now, ever since we got the internal bleeding mod that dropped with Corpus Railjack back in March. We've also had other bows surge forward since then, namely Merciless Cernos' gas build and now Proboscis Cernos electric build. But what stops us from working on Daikyu as well? Why stop at bows with innate AoE instead of pushing to see what else we can do? This is a gas Daikyu build. A few things differ from this build and the spammy split flight slash build. The first thing you probably noticed is that, well, Internal bleeding is gone. We've replaced this with Amalgam Daikyu Target Acquired, which is a final multiplier that increases all headshot damage by 75%, and this extends into the gas dots we create. It increases the headshot multiplier of normal enemies from 2 to 3.5, but it also increases the unique head crit multiplier to 3.5. Therefore, landing a crit headshot will now do 3.5 square damage instead of 2 square, or 12.25 damage instead of 4. Gas clouds created by this 12.25 damage can also headshot, which will benefit again from the increased 3.5 times multiplier, buffing the raw dot scaling to 42.875, but not all shots will be headshots. And unfortunately, remember, gas does not scale with elements and galvanized aptitude does not work on bows. So while this is a massive multiplier, this is really what is needed for gas to go up against armor and will only allow a couple of the kills to be much faster. But this will be how we get enough damage for gas Daikyu to ramp up and be as viable as an AoE weapon with just the AoE dot and no actual AoE damage. Basically, this mod is an extreme version of what Banes can do with double dipping logic. It's the same kind of math, but for headshots instead. And on top of that, this actual build does use a primed Bane, so our gas shots will have another independent multiplier 2.4 times separate from the target acquired mod as well. We want to guarantee status procs every shot, so we're going for max ranked Heat and Toxin 60/60s to reach 101.2% status just like the Viral Slash build. Vital Sense gives us the crit multiplier to power critical delays guaranteed crits. We have compensated critical delays fire rate penalty with primed Shred this time. Why not Vile Acceleration? Because our damage comes from gas AoE and not the main hit itself. By increasing the punch through to a further 5.2 meters, you will literally be able to shoot through entire crowds at once when grouped up, maximizing the amount of gas procs you create and overlap per shot. To take this even further, we have once again selected Split Flights as our multi-shot mod, so you can still easily reach 400% multi-shot. You're basically going to have a permanent 100% uptime on max Split Flights stacks. This may sound a bit counterintuitive to trying to land headshots at enemies for that massive head crit gas dot, but the reality is even with Split Flights, with grouping abilities and the distance you'll be standing away from them, you still have a very solid chance of hitting a few heads along the way, especially with 5.2 meters punch through. And the damage is high enough that spamming the shots a few times will be more than enough to shred them all apart. Because we aren't using internal bleeding with a strict 2.5 fire rate cap for double effect this time, we can slap on Arcane Acceleration on our Warframe as well to make up for not running Vile Acceleration and Primed Shred instead. Normally a critical delay plus Vile Acceleration build has net 2.4 fire rate, which is barely under the limit and doesn't allow you to bring Arcane Acceleration if you choose to slot on internal bleeding, which is why we didn't bring it. This gas build will have net 160% fire rate with Arcane Acceleration, with procs only 30% of the time on crits, which is another reason why we want critical delay for 100% crit chance with Split Flights. It will also cut the charge rate down to 0.38 seconds, which is important because Daikyu is one of the bows that will not fire unless fully notched. You cannot shoot a partial charge shot with Daikyu as you can with the other single target bows. On the other hand, if you want a little bit easier early on or single target killing while you're spreading the AoE, you can just drop Prime Shred entirely and slot internal bleeding instead, while also dropping down to point strike instead of critical delay. However, keep in mind this will drop your critical chance under 100%. We're sourcing our base damage from primary Merciless again with a small token 30% reload bonus to reduce the post-shot delay before we can start notching the next arrow. Finally, the secret sauce. Arrow Periphery. This makes it easier to shoot while in the air. But why do we really have this? Because of the passive on it. Putting enemies to sleep, it works on acolytes as well. Arrow Vantage gives you minus 100% gravity while aim gliding and is a Warframe mod. Basically, you float in place while you use it. We're also using a grouping ability on this loadout, so being slightly more static in the air is okay with Ensnare. The final arrow mod is Arrow Agility. This is a sniper mod. We aren't bringing a sniper, but your Sentinel can. Slap a Volklock on them. It's a Sentinel sniper weapon that came from Diriga. Use the usual Vigilante stat stick, but slap on Arrow Agility like I said as well. Now you have the full Aero Set Bonus, and now you can shoot him in the air with the crowd and AoE gas procs while aim gliding. Easy acolyte cheese. The Sentinel build is pretty basic, nothing special. I just have a preference for Worm because negate block status effects. You can also take Jin for Reawaken though if you so choose. Now what are the frame requirements? Well, all you need is a frame with a grouping ability such as Larva or Ensnare. Airburst works too, but I personally prefer Ensnare so you can get easier headshots, and Arcane Acceleration for comfort. And that's it. You can run whatever buffs you want, whether it be Eclipse or Roar for Bane double dipping or elemental buffs, I don't know. But really all you need is Arcane Acceleration and grouping. Then you go to town. The Amalgam mod puts in just so much work and scales with the Bane so well as well due to the gas dots. Then you have the insane punch through to hit everything with the arrow and maximize the amount of clouds created. And this is the second showcase with Point Strike and Internal Bleeding instead of all acceleration. That's all it is. Now take this info into Steel Path and show them all what Daikyu can really do. Enjoy! If this is your first time watching, feel free to leave a like or better yet subscribe. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. 79.5% of you are not subscribed. I'm trying my best to get you new information out always as soon as possible, like I've done with covering the Sisters of Parvos and Plague Star updates. Stick around if you want to see interesting memes and builds on a nearly daily basis. I'm also preparing to get you the info first once more new war info drops. You don't want to miss out on any of that, do you? That'll be it for this video. Thank you all for watching and see you all next time.